Ladies and gentlemen, this is purely a policy of douchebags, right? There is no disagreement in regards to the debate of the type of people that are going to raise it. But the douchebags who aren't going to raise this discussion is they know when they raise it with their partner, that their partner's going to walk out on them. They're probably just not going to raise it and they're going to stand in the status quo. The douchebag who is going to raise it knows that they can coerce their partner to sign onto this contract and they know that they're going to force them to pay damages. That's the stakeholder we defined, and they were the most important. Chris didn't want to deal with them. The fact of the matter is, those are the people we're here, we're going to protect. Any cost or any decision that exists in regards to the payment of money means that there is some sort of calculus that needs to be made in regards to consent. But the discussion about consent isn't evaluated at the time of the contract. It's when that contract is broken. So you evaluate the nature of consent 20, 30, 40 years ago, and that's when you have to make that discussion. It doesn't tell you how that consent's going to be made. It's harder to prove there was actual consent. That's how it makes that contract far more damaging than actually exists. People sign up to prenups that fuck them over all the time because emotionally they don't think that relationship's ever going to end and they don't think they're going to ever be in the position. If those people sign up to prenups now, what stops them also from signing up for this douchebag policy that Chris has been peddling? That's the fact of the matter of the type of people that we want to protect by not having a policy that actually exists. Wealthy partners. Let's talk about these in rebuttal firstly. Wealthy partners exist under both sides, right? Wealthy partners now, in a divorce, instead of an equal settlement, also get damages from the less wealthy partner. That completely screws over that relationship, and someone who is less wealthy has no incentive to ever leave them because they have to pay out at a constant rate for the rest of their lives if they thought they were in love with that person, and the damages was $1 million. That means for the rest of their life they're stuck in some sort of cycle of poverty. And you know what? They could be having to raise a child because they screwed up the contract because they had forced them to get an abortion. They said no. That's fundamentally going to be the problem in regards to what happened. Sure.
Under the status quo, you may be liable to financial repercussions if you leave a relationship when those are ordered by a court. You still cannot predict those. Why is this model any different?
It's different because you're signing up and you're getting a set amount of damages that actually exist. The court isn't making the decision or writing the contract for you, are they? It is two individuals in a room that the presumption is that they love each other and they are gaining in a relationship for the rest of their lives. That's an emotional discussion that you can't actually tangibly give me a proof that every couple's going to be exactly the same. If you love someone more than someone else, you're more likely to sign up for more things because you just don't really care about the damages because you want to be with that person. It puts the power on the person who has the more wealth, who's possibly less in love with that person, but that other person has the ability to gain into that relationship. Let's talk about what actually happens in regards to undermining relationships. I told you quite clearly already, and I flagged it, that relationship there is an emotive factor that you can't put reason on and you can't actually put a calculus on. But the cycle of a human being in a relationship is different. Relationships can be one of the most rewarding things for individuals, but they're also unpredictable. You don't know the type of factors that actually come in regards to it. They're some of the most rewarding things because sometimes you also have to make compromise. Your ability to invest in that relationship is so much impeded on your ability in your want that you know that it's something, you screw something up, you eat too many calories one day, and suddenly you're no longer in that relationship. Who the fuck is going to invest into that relationship if they really care in regards to what's going to happen? Relationships are dynamic. At people's different stages of their lives, they put more time in. Beck and Beavers are probably at their, their honeymoon stage at the moment. The lady you get, maybe it gets a bit worse. Who knows what's going to happen? The fact of the matter is that no one thinks about that at the time, right? Everything's supposed to go the way for the rest of your lives. That's what happens in regards to it. The core strength of a relationship as a metric should never be defined by the amount of sex or the calorie intake of that type of person. We acknowledge that divorce happens, okay? We acknowledge that it happens. But the fundamental thing is that the government provides some sort of incentive and acknowledges that happiness exists for those types of people who gain into those marriages. Sure.
Be comparative. What does an asymmetry of power do at a later point when a woman is financially dependent, presumably still emotional, and now being pressured to have sex?
She then can't say no to sex, and if she leaves the relationship, she pays damages. That's the comparative exercise, right? Instead of leaving and you can't possibly live because you're not living off your partner, you now can't live off your partner and you pay them money on a week-to-week basis under your damages. Well, then it gives them a huge financial capital and get a home loan on their house or any property to get out of the relationship. That's just fucking terrible, right? The fact of the matter is, it's superficial in regards to the metrics we put back in regards to some standard of what a relationship should be defined about. That's not the type of relationships we think the government should be supportive of how we have them. But it builds up resentment into that relationship. If you're forced to do actions on a week-to-week basis, then it no longer becomes that your love or the care of that relationship is conditional on other factors. People who need to leave that need that ability in regards to what happens. The core level of wealth, and the problem is these damages are an ambiguous number. There's no set benchmark, they said there's no minimum, there's no maximum. And you know what when Kieran asked this point of information in regards to abortion, Chris's response was, yeah, there's a cost of having an abortion. Sure, we acknowledge there's a cost of an abortion that you might have to pay for in the douchebag. But what we were talking about was that you keep the child and you have to pay damages. It's not just the cost of the abortion we're talking about, it's the living with that child and paying money because you have to keep that child. That's the important thing that actually exists. The free market exists in regards to the cost of abortions, right? That's really not what this debate is about. It's about the cost you get for keeping that child. What screws over that relationship even more? When the distribution of assets exists and a certain couple now has to pay has to pay damages constantly, they're having less financial capital and they're less likely to get children in any custody agreement that actually exists. Because the blame for the breakdown of the relationship was purely on them, but also now their financial ability to raise that child is getting paid constantly over and over again. That's not a good message, or there's no ability for that partner to ever leave that relationship if they know there's a higher possibility that they don't get to keep their children. That's really damaging in regards to what happens. Consent happens in regards to one instance at a time. We stop rape in marriages, for example, because we realise the consent isn't constant. It can't last for forever. The fact of the matter is this policy is saying consent does last for 20 or 30 years. That the agreement you made when you were 21 and you have X amount of sex every week is constant when you're 50 or you're 60 or you're 70. Forget like biologically, possibly not even possible. The words of influence that it has on those couples and their relationships is the most damaging thing that actually exists. We weren't happy to stand for douchebags and people who used to get out of marriages. We're happy to oppose this motion.